Hello everyone, Jared here, and if any video I make about China is sure to never allow me back into the country while the CCP remains in charge, it's definitely this one. In today's video, I'm doing yet another highlighting a minority in China that is being oppressed by the Chinese Communist Party under Xi Jinping, the Tibetans. Most of us know about Tibet, how the Chinese Communists took it over, how the Dalai Lama went into exile, and how the Tibetan people have been suffering under the CCP's governance ever since. However, not many people are aware of what is going on in the region today. According to numerous reports coming out of Tibet and more than 100 leaked government documents, Xi Jinping's government has implemented new policies that seek to wipe out Tibetans' culture and freedoms through forced labor and ideological re-education centers. This is yet another example of the escalating war on cultural and ideological diversity within China since Xi's rise to power in 2013. Before I go into detail about the ongoing situation in Tibet, I'm going to provide a bit of history on what has occurred in Tibet since the Chinese Communist Party took over. With the exception of two dynasties, the short-lived Mongolian-run Yuan dynasty and the final Manchurian-led Qing dynasty, Tibet has largely been a region without direct Chinese control throughout a majority of its history. After the fall of the Qing in 1913, Tibet was once again a nation that was free of Chinese control. That ended in 1951, however, when, after negotiations between Tibetan government officials, including the 14th Dalai Lama, Tenzin Gyatso, and the People's Republic of China, came up with a deal known as the 17-Point Agreement. This document states that Tibet will function as a highly autonomous region in which Tibetans are allowed to maintain their way of life, but recognize they are a part of the PRC, or People's Republic of China. Almost like one country, two systems. Sound familiar? The CCP regards this as a legal contract between the Tibetans and China today, but the Dalai Lama and other world governments argue that it is illegitimate as it was signed under duress. Not only that, but many of the terms were left vague and ambiguous on purpose so the CCP could justify future atrocities and actions taken in the region. Like all the other promises that the CCP makes, they inevitably break them over time. To the citizens of China, this is an event known as the Peaceful Liberation of Tibet, but it turned out to be anything but. By 1956, Tibetans in the easternmost parts of the Tibetan regions that are within and bordering today's Sichuan province started revolts against the CCP due to breaking their promises to leave Tibetans as autonomous. China had begun land reform and redistributed property that was promised to the Tibetan peoples. The next few years saw even more conflict, and as a result of increasing guerrilla fighting, which was partially backed by the CIA, the CCP responded with full force. Once the fighting reached Lhasa, the Dalai Lama fled Tibet into India, and there are many accounts of the massacres, tortures, and devastation brought by the CCP's campaign. The Tibetan resistance movement led to the 1959 Tibetan Uprising, in which at least 87,000 Tibetans were killed, and the following 15 years saw as many as 430,000 dead. Perhaps another devastating statistic is the fact that of the more than 6,000 documented monasteries that existed in Tibet as of 1959, fewer than 10 remain today. Many estates where Buddhist traditions were being taught were destroyed, and their teachers arrested as part of the Cultural Revolution. The 1980s saw the creation of the new CCP program, the National Strategic Project to Develop the West, which encouraged Han migration into the region and make the people more like the Han Chinese. Those who moved were granted bonuses and greater living conditions than their Tibetan counterparts, and this continued up until the 2000s. As of 2010, the Chinese Communist Party estimates that Tibetans make up as much as 90% of the region's population, making it the only autonomous region where a minority group makes up the majority of the province's population. So, what developments have occurred over the last 2 decades that contributed to the current situation? Well, in 2008, before the Olympics were being held in Beijing, Tibetans banded together to attack Han businesses as a means of trying to fight back against ever-increasing Sinofication. In response, the riots were cracked down on, and many in the international community condemned China's continual occupation of Tibet. Despite promises to improve their human rights record as part of the speech when securing the bid for the Olympics, they proceeded to crack down on Tibetans' cultural and religious freedoms further. Prayer flags, a symbol of Tibetan culture and religious practices, have been increasingly removed around the region, and at least 156 known cases of self-immolation have occurred, which have brought international attention to the worsening conditions in Tibet. Since Xi Jinping rose to power in 2013, the situation for the Tibetans has only become increasingly tragic. Tibetans have largely been removed from their traditional nomadic lifestyles and placed into towns where the government tries to change their way of life permanently away from herding into one of labor. Tibetans are even told that both their lands and herds are better off in government's hands and that they should instead simply become shareholders in state-run cooperatives. Realistically, this is all simply done to keep Tibetans away from their traditional lands and sacred sites. Teaching the Tibetan language is also strongly discouraged, with some regions' usage of the language within schools declining by as much as 90%. Mandarin teaching is mandatory for many subjects, and surveillance is prevalent in many schools to make sure they comply. If this sounds familiar to what is occurring with the Uyghurs in China's Xinjiang province or Inner Mongolia with the Mongolian population, well, you'd be right. That's because prior to 2016, Tibet was the place where the CCP began the experimental practices that are now fully operational today in Xinjiang against the Uyghurs. After having used them on the Uyghurs for a number of years and making some adaptations, they're bringing the program back to Tibet in a new and improved fashion. Although the people of Tibet are predominantly Buddhist, whereas the Uyghurs are mostly practitioners of Islam, both groups are targeted for religious suppression. Last year, in early 2019, a new crusade against Buddhism and its practitioners was launched in Tibet. Video surveillance has been established in all the temples. Buddhist festivals are scrutinized and students are being banned from participating in them. Religious activities and the number of people attending them has dropped below 10%, according to the mayor of Lhasa. Government officials are forbidden from practicing. Authorities closed down Larangar, the Buddhist academy city, to new enrollment. Government forces demolished thousands of buildings, including residences and places of worship in Yachengar, a major Buddhist center in western Sichuan. More than 6,000 monks and nuns have been displaced as a result. In the fall of 2019, Xi Jinping gave perhaps one of his most chilling speeches since taking office, stating that he seeks to move forward with the CCP's goal to ethnically fuse the peoples of Tibet with the rest of China through new means. While he states this is all for the altruistic goal of alleviating poverty by the end of 2020, this is actually a cover for cultural and ethnic cleansing. Under Xi, the government has mandated that all Tibetans are to partake in military-style training to learn about the party's values in addition to vocational skills, and are assigned low-skill jobs as manual laborers. Teams of government officials are systematically placed in homes where they are paired with families to observe their actions. Every Tibetan citizen has a government file detailing their life. When people are sent to work as laborers in workshops, it is often in locations far away from friends and family so that they are easier to control. Many of the workers are even transferred to other parts of China, where they have no access to their families anymore. In the meantime, while parents are working away in factories, children are forced into boarding schools, and if they refuse to attend, then they are not allowed access to government welfare or subsidies. In the first 7 months of 2020, over 500,000 Tibetans, or around 15% of the region's population, have voluntarily participated in this strongly encouraged training. Tens of thousands have been transferred to work in different parts of China. In a speech Xi Jinping gave last month, he stated that what is going on is necessary to promote the Sinicization of Tibet. However, paradoxically, at the same time, the Chinese government denies that any of this forced labor is occurring, of course. Don't worry, though, because as a report that came out in January from the Tibetan branch of the People's Republic of China stated, everything going on in the region is all meant to tackle the mental poverty of the Tibetans and to guide the masses to create a happy life with their hard-working hands. At this rate, if nothing is done to stop what is occurring to the Tibetans, I doubt that their culture will exist anymore among the next generation. Many critics, including the Dalai Lama, have stated that cultural genocide is occurring in Tibet as we speak. And I agree. As I've said before, I hope that this does not require war to change, but we cannot allow the CCP to continue doing this to its own people, let alone trying to expand its control overseas or into neighboring countries. I wish the best for the peoples of Tibet going forward, and if you wish to help raise awareness of the current situation in Tibet, please share this video with others. Thanks for watching, and I hope you will come back for future videos. Until next time.